All right, so we're going to start looking at some examples together. So our rule is down at the bottom. It's our pre-image is in black, and then I'm using red for our letters for our image. So our pre-image is X comma Y. That's what we start with. And then we're reflecting. And our new rule is X comma negative Y. So our Y is going to become a negative number. This is when we reflect over the X axis. Okay, there's a different rule that we'll talk about in a few minutes when we reflect over the Y. But right now for our X, if you're going to flip it over the X axis, our X stays the same, but our Y becomes the opposite. So we need to follow the directions, and it says label your X and Y axis first. Then number 2 says label each point. So we have A, B, and C. Then it says for number 3, reflect the shape across the X axis. So I like to color my X axis, and we've used green before for our X. So now we're going to flip it over the X axis. So starting at the X, I'm going to count to each point. So 1, 2, 3 for A. Now starting at the X, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go down to flip it. So 1, 2, 3. And my point's going to be A prime. I'm going to use red and label it A prime, AI. So now we're going to do the same process for B. I'm starting at my X and I'm going to count. So 1, 2. Now from my X, I'm going to count down. 1, 2. So I put my point and I'm going to label B prime. So now we're doing C. It's 4 up to C. So from my X, I'm going to count 4 down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put my point and label C prime. Then I need to connect my points, and I've made my shape. So here's my X. I had my triangle, and I flipped it down. So do you see right here is B, and when I flip it, B. So they've become opposites. So here's my rule again, X comma Y, and it becomes X comma negative Y. So A is at 5 comma 3. If I count 5 comma 3, my image now, my X of 5 stayed the same, but my Y became a negative. It went down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Negative 3. So if I look at B, B is at 1 comma 2. And if I'm going to flip it over my X axis, My x of 1 stayed the same, but my y became a negative, so -2. And c was at 1, 4. My 1 stayed the same, but my y of 4 became a negative. All right, so put your board on the floor real quick. We're going to use it again in a minute, but I want you to watch first. So now we're going to reflect over our y-axis. We're going to flip this way. So our rule for over the y, our y stays the same now, but our x becomes the opposite. Okay, so our rule, x comma y, it becomes, for our image, -x comma y. So x becomes the opposite, y stays the same. So the first thing we do is label our x and y. Then we label the points on our shape, A, B, C, and D. Now we're going to reflect over our y-axis. And so I color it yellow. So I know that I'm going to be flipping, that's backward, flipping my shape. So from the y, I'm going to count now. So 1, I'm going to go the other way, 1. Here's my point, A prime. Now I'm going to count to B. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice I started at A. So when I flip it now, I'm going to start counting from A prime. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Put my point. Here's B prime. Now I'm going to go to D. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to flip it. 1, 2, 3. Put my point and label it D prime. And last is C. I'm going to start counting from D. So 1, 2. So from my image, I need to start counting from D prime. 1, 2. Put my point. Here's C prime. Okay, so do you see my shape? It flipped over the y-axis. Okay, so my y stayed the same, but my x, it started out negative, and then I flipped it, and it became positive. So if I follow the rule, my x became the opposite. It became positive. My y's stayed the same.